The mind can ramble off in strange ways.
You're in for a real treat.
Punchlines Podcast.
Your next comic has been on the Jay Leno Show, David Letterman. Please welcome the very funny Mitch Fatal.
Punchlines Podcast.
Oh, that guy's fucking hilarious.
Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve.
Punchlines. That would be my first question to Tom Papa, but first I'll do the intro.
Okay.
This is Punchlines Podcast, episode number 6. One of the more exciting ones because I have one of my old friends, one of the few people that couldn't turn me down when I asked you. Tom Papa's here.
I had no choice.
And you were gracious enough to act like this was something you wanted to do, which was good. My co-host is Mr. Cory Sanhagen, who is the number 3 bantamweight as of now in the UFC. And I guess that was what my first question would be is, do you watch any UFC? Do you have any questions that you've ever wanted to ask a fighter? Because he's here for you now. So either ask him or forever hold your peace.
You thought we were going to ask you questions.
Yeah, I should have prepared. I don't watch a lot, to be honest, and which is really just a time thing. I haven't seen any shows. I haven't.
You've never seen a UFC event?
I've seen like bits and pieces. I'm pretty regular on Rogan, and so like to show up there and not have a lot of knowledge always feels embarrassing.
Well, now you can tell Joe that you're best friends with Cory Sanhagen.
Yeah.
That'll
be cool.
Do you mind being best friends with Tom?
Just for the conversation?
Yeah, for the conversation,
cool.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little naive to it all.
Well, it's not really about anything. It's just more about fighters and comedians and the similarities we have and who we are as people.
Right.
And so I just gave Cory a little insight into you and how we know each other. And I guess I'll say the first thing that I said to Cory was, and this is what I'm interested in getting in with you. You, when you came into the group of people that I started with, you were one of the people. It was me, you, Louis C.K., Attell, Jim Norton.
Right.
You seemed to be, out of all of us, the one that would be elected president of our club because you didn't seem to have a lot of demons. You almost and you almost seemed out of place because you were way more together. You were way more together. That's my wife. I gotta go.
See you later.
You seemed way more together than most of us, and you also never made any excuses for the fact that you had a really good childhood. You were close with your parents, etc.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got that. Had that feeling when I first showed up. I was just like naturally funny and just enjoyed having a good time. And then I showed up into New York, and it was a lot of people who were into comedy because they were working through some stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, this isn't my crowd?
Yeah, and I just wanted to be a part of it, just to be a part of it. And then you realized there was a lot of other elements to all these guys. There was a lot of, not all, but there were a lot of people that carried a lot of darkness with them.
Yeah, and still do.
And I wasn't that way, but, of course, when I started... especially when I started going through the ranks. So you started a little before I did.
I think I was there maybe a year or two before you. Yeah,
I was 93.
Right. I think I started doing stand-up in 85 or 86.
Right. Yeah, so you were just a little ahead of me. So when I got to see all you guys, all those people you listed, it was like they were like the juniors when I was a freshman in a way.
Yeah.
So I wanted to be a part of it all. And I actually went through like a couple months of being on stage and trying and like acting a little like Attell, like leaning back and like, trying to be a little darker, telling some dirty jokes. And even the audience who didn't know me at all were like, that's not you. You're not a dark character. So then I really realized it's okay to be your own thing. I think that was the biggest key in my little journey through New York, which was stop looking at other people. And
were you looking at other people for a while?
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah, for a long time.
And did you ever think to yourself, I wish I had more demons, or I wish I was darker, because I know now, and looking back, I'll admit this, I know now that, like, I think we had, in an odd sort of way, a belief that if you weren't in some way really fucked up, that you couldn't be a comedian.
Right.
And that was the message, and I had always believed in some sort of romantic vision that, like, I had to be nuts to be funny.
Yeah.
And it's not
and
true.
I was funny. I did think that for a bit. I saw Vanessa Hollingshead had a one-woman show, and she had this very dark, complicated history. And I remember walking out like, wow, if only my life had been like that, I'd have something to write about. But I also came to a realization, I've been really funny my whole life. Yeah. So why would it change now that I'm in New York? Like, should I create, like, why would I have to create a backstory to be funny when I'm already funny?
Yeah.
So did you have a moment like that?
Yeah.
Where it just clicked for you just like that?
Not where it just clicked. Well, kind of, actually. Kind of. I really just put blinders on. And I think this happens to a lot of people in comedy, at least. It's when you stop thinking about everybody else and you just put blinders on and think about you.
Sure.
Yeah, I haven't done that yet.
That's really when things start to kind of happen, because you aren't influenced by anything anymore. So I stopped watching other comics. I would just wait until it was my time to go on, and I would go in and go up. And I stopped involving myself in the gossip of what everyone had and what people were doing and who got Conan before me and all that stuff. It really came out of preservation. Like, I couldn't handle watching everybody learning what everybody else's successes were.
Yeah.
It drove me crazy. I was like all over the place, like, but I should be on Conan. Why aren't I doing that? And then, so it really came out of self-preservation. But once I did it, and looking back, it was just wise to do, because it really just drew focus, and you can just go to work.
Work on what? Your particular...
My craft.
Your craft.
Which is really all it comes down to.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter if you have a messed up childhood. It doesn't matter if you had an easy time of it. It matters if you do the work and keep writing and keep performing and keep getting better. That's the only thing that matters.
Isn't that interesting? That's like, we've heard that a few times by multiple people. And that's kind of the way that I see performance too, is if you want to be good at something, you have to, just focus on you and your performance. And then all of the successes and things like that will happen after you've really dialed in your craft.
Just go to work.
Cory's told me oftentimes that he doesn't concern himself with what his opponent is doing, or just becoming the better fighter that he can be. And that's the thing.
Yeah,
that's it.
I look back now at the beginning of my career, and that's why I'm so glad you agreed to do this, with a lot of regret and a lot of painfulness that I didn't enjoy the incredible journey we were all going through. I was much more obsessed with that I had to become famous, that I had. And I said to Jim, I said, I feel bad that I wasn't able to appreciate how he was doing something that hadn't really been done before. He was talking about, we talked to him before about his Monster Rain stories and his transvestite stories and stuff. And in my mind, I was like, well, he's not telling jokes, so he's not as good. And everything was, if I'm funnier than that guy, if I'm funnier than that guy.
Right. Well, that's interesting you say that, though, because I remember those times, because I opened for Mitch. Mitch took me out on the road with him for a couple of years. Yeah. And I remember you as you were that way in some regard. You were very focused. You were very hardworking. You weren't messing around. Like you didn't, you were very structured in how you
I was very
took
structured.
care of your work.
Yeah.
But I also, why it was so much fun to be with you, you had a real joy in what we were doing.
I loved it.
When we would tour around, we would just laugh in the car together because we had to drive to all these horrible gigs. We did this one thing.
I remember. I know we can talk about
Wisconsin, where the routing was horrible. It was like there were 3 cities in the south and 3 in the north. And rather than do all 3 in the south and then go north, we started in the south and we had to go north and then we had to go back down
300 miles every day.
Was that what it was?
It was something that I remember we kept passing like a Paul Bunyan statue halfway. And we would look up at it. And I remember, there's a lot I remember about that time that I'm interested if you knew what I was going through. I also had a girlfriend at the time named Erica.
Right.
Who I was obsessed with. Do you remember? And I was in a lot of pain, and I would stay up nights because I was convinced she was cheating on me. Do you remember any of this?
No, not really.
Because you were such a good friend, I would talk to you obsessively about it.
Right.
And I don't think you understood how bad it was.
Right.
But I would get very caught up in that. Like,
right.
And I don't know if you remember, but I was like, I'm going to move in with her because that way she won't cheat on me. She was a stripper I had met.
Right, I do remember that.
And that's what we were just talking about with Jim. That's the picture still up at the Comedy Cellar.
Yeah, that was Erica.
That was Erica.
Yeah. She was beautiful.
Yeah, she was beautiful. And of course, I just thought she was cheating on me constantly.
Of course.
And she probably was. Yeah. I think you actually had sex with her, right? Behind my back. But I was a different person back then, and I wish I had enjoyed the joy a lot more, and I wish I had enjoyed.
Well, that's what's interesting because you know better than anyone what was going on in your head. But for me, that time was this ridiculous tour, playing these crazy, mostly awful gigs. But we just had so much fun.
I remember laughing.
We just laughed the whole time, and we would stop for our snacks, and we would just get in the car, and we just crazy conversations, and it was so insane. Like if someone gave us that routing for a tour now, if you flew to Wisconsin and they said, okay, now this is what you have to do, you would say, no, I'm getting back on a plane and I'm going home. But we were young and naive and just like, all right, that'll be fun.
And you could do it. You could do it.
Just win for it.
And so it's interesting you say that because then I got married way later than you. Everybody assumed, first of all, when you got married and had kids, that your career was over. Kids kill career. And you still, what an amazing person you are. You still knew what you wanted, didn't let anybody affect you. At your wedding, everybody was doing jokes about that it wasn't going to last more than a year, and you would just laugh along with it. Like you always were just very, very lighthearted about everything. And was that just because you knew your marriage was going to work, which it did. Your kids were going to, it was just incredible to do that at such a young age, just when you're getting success, which was insane to do. Yeah.
No, I met her. I was just talking about this the other night where I met her and I had a futon. I was in a horrible apartment. Kyle Dunnigan was my roommate. There were no doors between anything inside. You had to brush your teeth in the kitchen sink because there was no sink in the bathroom.
You're describing Cory's apartment.
And that's when I met her. You know what I mean? Like it was just purely out of just being in love. It had nothing to do with, being successful or any of that because I was pulling my bed out to lay down with her. And but yeah, I just knew on the relationship side, I just knew when I met her that this was a no-brainer. This was going to go easily. But the lighthearted part of it, I was just writing about this. I have another book that I'm just wrapping up, and it's my second book. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, I don't have any books, Tom.
Yeah, it's okay. And
I can get you a gig in Wisconsin, though.
It was about being positive, about like maintaining like a positive attitude and stuff. And, part of it is luck. Part of it is I was born into a family that was pretty stable. Yeah. Everyone was together. Doesn't have depression really in the family. My one grandfather did, but everybody else was pretty even-keeled, not a lot of real mental illness that they had to deal with. Yeah. And I get dropped into that family. So I'm in a good starting spot. And then that family also, especially my two grandmothers, just had this nonstop mantra, about we are lucky to be here. We are so fortunate that we have friends and family. How great is this? Who cares if you have some hardship? Get over it. Don't be a baby. Get up, brush yourself off, keep going. This is a gift that we have. Yeah. And that was drilled into my head nonstop. So the combination of those two things really gave me this kind of attitude at a very young age that I can turn around circumstances. I remember distinctly waking up as a child and being like in 8th grade or whatever and being like, I feel like crap. I don't want to go to school. And literally clap my hands and be like, all right, let's change that. Let's go.
At 13 years old.
Yeah, just be like, okay, let's make this a good day rather than a shitty day.
Wow.
That's like a superpower, man.
It's kind of
That's a superpower.
But I really do believe, and I don't take it for granted, that part of it is my makeup. Like if If I had any kind of depression genes chemically in my, that would be harder to do. I know a lot of people, you can't do that. But it was also being taught that, like having that skill from the time I was a child.
But Cory's often told me, and it's helped me as well, that being a fighter, no matter what situation you're in, there's different voices that will always come into your head, and you can choose to let those voices, because everybody has them. It's learning that voice doesn't have to be there at that moment.
Yeah, interesting. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's just this whole idea of like, I think I just read a book called Taming Your Gremlins, but it was about just how these different voices or your ego or whatever fears or you might have in your head are just, they're just that. They're separate from who you actually are. And if you can, at that point, create who you want to be, like just like you waking up in the 8th grade and being like, this is going to be a bad day, and then you saying that, oh nope, that's not me today, I'm going to choose to be this way.
Yeah.
But people have to figure that shit out on their own. It sounds like you had it.
Yeah, I did have it.
Yeah,
I did. It was and it kind of set me up to like go through, and look, it's not
easy.
It's not locked
sure.
and loaded.
Yeah.
It's, there are times when things get dark, and you go through loss and all that kind of stuff, and self-doubt, still, there's still, but you kind of, you just gotta, but I always kind of go back to that little thing. I do TM, which is,
Transcendental meditation.
yeah, which talks to that, like that, all those things, all those little voices, all those things creeping in, they're not really you. Your brain is a very busy thing, pulling in these images and stuff all the time. And if you can just be at peace with it, you can kind of.
Can you explain just really quick before we move on what TM is exactly, what it looks like? Just because I'm interested, because I've played with meditation and stuff.
Yeah, so did I for a long time, like since college. I was always counting breaths. I was always. I would read books on it.
I was masturbating a lot in college.
I remember that. And as soon as I'm done, I want to hear about how that works. And then my friend, to name drop, my friend Jerry Seinfeld, had always been doing TM. And he asked me like what I've been doing, and I told him, and he was like, yeah, maybe you want to look into TM. And I was like, I don't know. It doesn't seem that different. I'm counting breaths. I'm doing what he does. He gets a mantra from an instructor, but what does that really mean? And I was actually on Rogan, and I was talking about how tired I was, and that I was, my kids and my work, and then I'd have to go out and do spots at night, and I was just like, man, it's tiring. And he called me and he said, I saw you on Joe, and I'm sending you to my TM guy. He goes, you don't understand what this is going to do for you. It gives you like 6 more hours of your day.
Wow.
And I took him up on it, and it answered the question of like all the stuff that I had been doing on my own was it's different, and it's different. It's really simplified way to meditate. And it's quick. The mantra is, they give you a mantra. You sit with this guy for 4 days in a row, like an hour or 2 each day. And he gets to know you. He talks about what it's all about. How the best description is that there's like, if you think of the sea and all the turbulence and all the manic stuff that's happening at the top, at the where the water hits the sky, it's all tumultuous. But if the deeper you go, the calmer it gets. The mantra brings you into that depth, and you just start doing the mantra, and you start doing it, and every day is different, but you just start doing it. It brings you into this place. Your brain gets trained to go there a little, and the more you do it, and it just brings you to this depth. And
what's at the depth?
Anything.
You have to pay him for the answer.
Sometimes there's constant thoughts about everything you're doing in the day that you think you should be blocking out. Like my old ways of meditating was stop thinking about that. There's no stop thinking about that. Just let it happen. And some days those thoughts are going, and that's okay, because that means your brain needs to go through those things. And some days it's like weird right before you're about to fall asleep, strangeness, those little images you see right when you're at sleep's edge, weird, whatever. Sometimes it's that. And it's 20 minutes. And the best way I can describe it is that it is a way to reboot your nervous system. Okay. So more than sleep, we have ways to take care of ourselves physically, but there's nothing that can take your nervous system that's dealing with all this stimulus all the time, all the stuff we're just starting to talk about, your girlfriend troubles, your career stuff, all that stuff. There's no other process other than meditation that allows you to run that nervous system that's dealing with all that, just shut it down and reboot it. And I'm telling you, it's not like you come out of it, it's not that I come out of it and I'm like, okay, now we can go.
Run a marathon.
I'm ready to go. Yeah. But 3 hours later, you realize I'm still going.
Yeah.
Everyone around me is falling off. Everyone's tired and I'm still alert. And it's like, not a fake energy. It's just, I can go.
So do you do this every day then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every day.
20 minutes every day?
Once in the morning and once in the afternoon.
Okay.
And
for 20 minutes.
I try and do it as soon as I wake up. That's important one. And then one in like around 4 o'clock.
Okay.
That gets me through that part of the day.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm interested because I'll do the same thing for my 8 weeks of camp. I'll kind of slack off a little bit when I'm not in training camp. But when I'm in training camp, I always make sure that I'm doing like my 20, 30 minute just sitting and quieting those voices. Or if I feel like something's inside of me, just asking what that is inside of me and figuring out where that rabbit hole is going to take me. But that's really interesting.
It's important. And I'm, for me, going and actually sitting with a TM guy just clicked it into another level.
Okay. Interesting.
It just really, because you're kind of finding it out. It's like learning tennis on your own in your house. And then all of a sudden someone comes up and is like, no, hold the racket.
Yeah.
Like a pro comes and says, just hold the racket this way.
Yeah.
And just bend your knees this way. And you're like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow, I'm actually going to do that. That's awesome.
We all have an ability, and we talk about this, we all have an ability to see something and just think that we can kind of do it because it looks easy, and that's kind of like, and I always tell Cory, in both our professions, a lot of people, when they start doing stand-up for the first time, the number one thing here is like, it's a lot harder than I expected. That like I didn't realize I didn't have nothing to say.
Right.
Like I remember thinking when I first started doing stand-up, like this is going to be easy.
Right.
It eventually was easy for me, and that's why I was successful. But there was a good part of time where all of a sudden I was like, wait a second, these lines that I wrote that I thought were hysterical while I was writing them aren't coming out that way. The audience isn't laughing at them. The way I pictured it, getting that applause wasn't working and stuff. And then, but in comedy, you almost do have to self-teach yourself because there are not coaches there. I did have a comedy class when I was 15.
Right.
That I think put me ahead of everybody else looking back, but it was just the fact that I was able to get on stage.
Were there comics that were ahead of you that you learned from? So that you had conversations with?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I was too egotistical back then to think that anyone was better than me. Mm-hmm. That's part of my lost childhood that I think I had because I missed out on a lot of stuff. I saw Cory's sparring sessions yesterday, and one of the things I was really interested in, because I think it's fighting his life. Honestly, I do. And one of the things is everybody was helping everybody else out with different moves, realizing that nobody can know everything. That there's a top fighter named Neil Magny. What is Neil ranked like 8 now or something?
He hasn't fought in a long time. He's probably still top 15.
He's one of the top fighters in the world. He wins most of his fights, and he had a coach right over him almost going like, no, Neil, you got to grab with this arm. You're grabbing with the left arm, not the right arm.
Right.
And realizing that his coach had a talent that Neil had to put aside his ego, that I'm one of the best fighters, and go, I have to learn how to do it, and you're never stopping. So I think if I had paid more attention, I would have. What I do remember is just being amazed by certain comics' abilities to stick to who they were, meaning that Louis C.K. never changed who he was for the audience, and I'll never forget Louis coming back from a military tour and me saying, like, how did you do? And he's like, I died every night, like no one. And I remember saying to him, like, did that bother you? And he was like, well, yeah, of course it bothers me, because I was like amazed at, because I would have figured out a way to get them.
Get through, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
but he was like, no, that's his act. And Louis had this. That's what I was more obsessed with back then. Comedians that were able to know that they were talented, and you had that confidence as well.
Nah,
I think you did,
you
Tom.
had that confidence.
No, I didn't. I just thought
I didn't.
but you did, and I never understood. And then I started to get to know you, and a story from your life blew me away so much that it's inspired me to this day. And it's funny, now I realized all the people I've met through the years have helped me in ways that I never even understood.
Right.
And the way I remember you introducing me to your dad.
He loves you.
And you told me he was a fan.
Oh, yeah.
And he came to the shows. And then you told me, and I don't know if this is going to blow you away or not, Cory, but it blew me away. Him and his dad every year would do a motorcycle ride together across the country. Just you
Somewhere in the country.
Just you and your dad.
Yeah, and a couple other guys.
And the fact that your dad cared enough about you, because my dad never even played checkers with me.
Right.
And your dad actually, and I always thought to myself, like, I wonder if you know how special that is. You probably didn't know at the time, because that's just how you were raised.
Right.
But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because I have a son now.
Right. Congratulations, by the way.
And I'm going to be the dad that your dad was to him. And I always say to my wife, he'll probably never know that that's different or odd, because I'll just grow up. But I thought that was amazing that you had that. And that confidence was with you the rest of your life.
Right. That's what I was saying in the beginning. Like, I got lucky to be born into that.
But you didn't know you were lucky until a certain point. When did you realize that?
No. It wasn't really... I don't know exactly.
Because your dad's told me that he wished I was his son. I don't know if you know that.
You and Nick DiPaolo, actually. I think he likes both of you guys a little bit more. No, he coached me in football from.
He just wanted a son.
From kindergarten.
He wanted a boy.
He even got on the staff in high school when I was a senior, which no dads were like assistant coaches, but he managed to get onto the staff. Like, he wanted to be there. And and then when I went into stand up, like, he would always show up, and he's still kind of that way. Yeah. And, but you take it for granted, I think. I think, whenever you're kind of in it, you just think, well, it's just my dad. He's so annoying. At times I totally, as an adult, really appreciate it. And I knew, like, it was, he was different. He was...
No one's dads came to watch us except your dad. Like, it was a very rare and beautiful thing. And
it was rare, for sure. Yeah. And I slowly kind of started to realize it as we went through. But again, I think... it was being born into that family. Like, his mother was the one that was having, like, everybody over the house every Sunday, like 21 grandkids.
Right.
And, you know what I mean? Like, it was natural, I guess, is the way. It was natural for me to kind of feel that. And I know when I got older, and like when you showed up in New York and met all these comics with dark things, it was like stories and stuff. It was like, oh, this guy, like, never saw his dad, or this guy hates his dad, or this guy's parents don't want him to do this at all. And I realized as I matured that I had less to deal with. I had less baggage of that stuff to deal with. And yet, I'm sorry, but just to wrap it up, my mother thinks that I am still wrestling with baggage of my father, because he was strict, and, we still had our struggles, but I always try and tell her, like, no, I am aware how much further along we were than other people, but that doesn't discount that you still have teenage angst or whatever that stuff is.
So I'm going to ask you a question just for my own selfish reasons, because I really want to know the answer to this, because you seem like you have a lot of answers.
I think I do.
You said that it's a lot of luck, and like you were born into this pretty fair situation for yourself. Do you ever feel like a little bit guilty about it? Because I run into that a lot, man, because I kind of, we're given this narrative. It's the same in comedy as it is in sport, where you're supposed to come from this trial or something, and then power through it, and then that's what makes you great. But in my circumstance, that's not really what it was, where it's just like, I had supportive parents, I had all of the stars kind of lined up for me. And I always question, because for two reasons. One, I grew up in an area where the people were very mixed, where it was a lot of like lower class people and then a lot of like middle, upper class people. So that always was this weird thing to me when I was growing up, where I was like, man, some of my friends can't even afford to like, for us to go to McDonald's right now, you know? So that's one of them. And then also I work a part-time job that I do a lot less than I used to, but I work for a nonprofit dealing with traumatized kids, where I see and I'm an assistant teacher there, but I'll see these kids and like how terrible their situations are, and how that is going to affect the rest of their life, whether they like it or not. And it was nothing that they did wrong. And I run into the problem of like, man, why am I so lucky?
Yeah.
Do you ever run into that problem, or?
No.
No? You just accept that this is the situation you're in? And
because I don't know you at all.
Yeah.
But I know it's not a picnic being you.
Yeah.
It's not. I know like those things are nice, and you didn't have to deal with certain things that other people that you're running into had to deal with, but you struggle. And you have demons, and you have loss, and you have all of that. And it's hard. It's really hard. Even where you grew up and how you grew up and had all that support. Same with me. I had pretty stable stuff, but it wasn't all sunshine and puppies. That's not how it goes. Yes, you don't have to maybe wrestle with as much as some of these kids you're running into, but guess what? You're able to help them. Because of that path.
Sure.
And I would feel guilty if I sat back and tried to get money from my family, say, and do nothing in this world.
I see.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
you're
very
doing
eye-opening.
it. You're working hard. Your eyes are open. You're in conversations with Mitch because you are searching and you're pushing and you're going further.
Right.
There's nothing to be guilty about at all.
Sure.
You're
living the best life that you can live. And that's,
and being involved with other human beings.
And you talked about sadness, and I wanted to bring up something that happened in the past that I look back on, and I think you were reaching out to me as a friend, and I think I probably could have been a better friend to you. So a lot of this getting older is also making peace with the people who were very important to me, as you were. And one of the things was, and I told Cory this, so you talk about the sadness that you've dealt with. I remember very distinctly you getting a TV show, and I think it was called Come to Papa.
Yeah.
And Steve Carell was on the show. It was the beginning of Steve Carell's career.
Yeah.
And it was panned immediately, the show.
Yeah.
And I remember you had left a message on my machine, and I don't know if you remember this, and it said, how do you wake up in the morning knowing that America hates you?
Did I really?
Yeah. And I look back at that, and I tell Cory, whenever I have a memory that sticks with me, it sticks with me for a reason.
Yeah.
The reason being that first of all, I don't think I could have been there for you at that time, because I think there was jealousy that I didn't have a TV show.
Right.
Honestly, I think that it was one of those things that if you have two friends that start out and one friend becomes the UFC champion and the other one's in one of these other organizations at that point, and it's funny too, I had been offered shows, I just wasn't good at it.
Right.
And you got a show, and I think there was almost a sense of jealousy that me and Tom started out together. Tom got a TV show. I don't want to say that I had a glee that you weren't beloved, but I remember at that point feeling sad. And also, I didn't know at that time that you thought enough of me as a friend that you maybe wanted to talk about that.
Right. That's interesting.
Do you remember what you were going through at that time? That must have been a really hard time for you.
I do remember. It's not that hard. It wasn't that hard. It was confusing, and it was.
Well, you were offered a show before you were ready, right? I mean,
I didn't know what was happening. I did a shot on Conan, and they came and got me. And next thing I knew, I was made my way on air. Like it was just kind of. It was happening.
Could you believe it was happening at the time?
Not really. Like at moments, it was just like, whoa, you'd walk out onto the set and there's like all these people and millions of dollars being spent. And you're like, this is all from my idea that I just had in my head because and it was, it's a weird thing. Like when I look back, it's almost like, I just figured, well, this will probably happen again. You know what I mean? And then you realize, how hard it was to get back to that position. It was like, years before I got another show.
Yeah.
And it was definitely a difficult time, but again, I remember like trying to figure it out. I remember being on the phone with Seinfeld and him telling me that you're better off having like been in the game and had it get knocked off than not at all. He goes, now you're in this other level, and now you can move from there. And I definitely had to kind of figure it out. Like I didn't know enough about my career or the trajectory of the stuff. Like, do you get one shot and you're done? But like, like fighting, it's like, no, you get up and you keep going. Like it's up to you really. Yep. And, it's like, I don't like when I look back on my life, I do not think of that as one of the horrible things that happened to me at all.
Wow.
I don't.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think it really was pretty much a blessing. And it was only a couple months. There's a lot to that story of why that show went away. I learned more about the politics of television than I did about my own ability.
Yep.
I was doing the best I could. I was doing it, but I didn't know that Steve Carell had accepted the people that were making my show, put Steve Carell in the office while we were still shooting my show.
Right. So you were being used as a pawn of some sort.
Had no idea.
Yeah.
Had no idea. This new president came in, inherited my show, didn't really like it, tried Steve Carell out as a boss on my show, saw that as an audition, and put him in the office. And I didn't know any of this until after. I was just like, whoa, man, they're killing our show. What's going on? And, oh, good for Steve. He got another gig. I had no idea that it overlapped like that. Yeah. So it really wasn't that I was lazy or wasn't working hard or wasn't talented. I was a victim of these circumstances. And that's a lot of life. That's a lot of show business. And I was like 2 months after the show was canceled, I drove back onto that same lot, onto NBC's lot, and went to do The Tonight Show as a comedian. Yeah. And I realized, oh, I'm in control of this. They can't stop me as a comedian. They can take my shows away. Right. But look who's parking next to Jay Leno's car and going to go tell 7 minutes of jokes on The Tonight Show. Yeah. I am. That's in I have control over this. Right. And that gave me power. Where if I was an actor, I wouldn't have that same thing. But as a comedian, I knew this is something I can work at, I can get great at, and you can't stop me. Yeah.
So comedy is your love, not acting.
Yeah. I have a lot of loves. Like I do love
Mitch
all that other. Mitch Fatel is definitely the big one. I do love you. No, some other people would have run. Yeah, you should have. One time when I think we were in Florida once, and he knocks on my door. We had a hotel room, and we're across from each other, across the hall. I think I remember this. Knock, 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 knock. He's so excited. I'm like, what's he doing? Like, we're 3 hours till.
That sounds like
3 hours.
You just can't hold it in.
I love it.
Yeah.
3 hours till the show. And he's in a robe. And he's like, I just shaved my whole body. I was like, what? He goes, I started trimming, and then I realized, why do I need any of this hair? And I shaved it all. I have no more body hair.
Still do it. Yeah.
You were so excited. I was like, well, good for you, I guess.
And then you started shaving me after that, if I remember. That's how you got so much work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting because Cory, so that was the epitome. That was almost the analogy of that was your loss. That fight was a loss.
Right.
And
first of many.
Cory? What did you take from your first loss? How did you learn from your first loss?
Like a high stakes.
Because he's only had one loss, which is very.
How long have you been doing it?
10 years now.
10 years.
Yes. Well, I guess I've had two. One as an amateur, one as a professional.
Right.
Yeah. How did I take the first loss?
Well, first of all, do you go home and curl up in the fetal position? What did you personally do? And was it overwhelming to get your first loss? Because like that's what I said. Is like I looked at Tom's show, and Tom's show, I thought it was one of the most heartbreaking times you've ever. I remember thinking, and this is going back to what a loss feels like. I don't know if I could have dealt with that. I remember those words. What do you do when you wake up one morning and realize America hates you? I remember those exact words because I remember thinking, I'm glad I don't have to deal with that because I would just beat myself up. Meanwhile,
Right.
you're telling me you actually looked at it as a positive. That was the difference.
Took time.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was making that phone call. I must have been in a hurtful state.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it did not linger.
By the way, that is also the time I told Steve Carell I would go on tour with him to Wisconsin if he wanted the gig.
He should have.
Yeah. So how did you deal? So first of all, your first loss, do you go back home and think, okay, well, I'm obviously I got to get another job, or do you?
Do you think it's over?
I thought that, yeah, because I was very close to being signed to the UFC right before. I think because I was the co-main event at the First Bank Center, so for a promotion that just feeds people into the UFC pretty much. So if I would have done well in that fight, I likely would have gotten signed, either that one or the one right after that. So, but even bigger than that, I think the biggest thing that I had to take away from that is I had to ask myself, because it hurt really, really bad to lose. And I remember just like thinking to myself, like, man, like you punked out, like you're not a fighter. Like, but the biggest thing that it was, I had to readdress what my identity was, because my identity had been so wrapped up into being this like fighter who's supposed to be very good, who's supposed to make it to the UFC, who's supposed to do all of these things. And when I lost, that shook all of that up, and I had to re-ask myself, who was I and why am I even doing this to begin with? And like that led down the trail of like, I spent a lot of time in the mountains that summer. I think I lost in February, and then I just spent a lot of time in the mountains hiking and spending a lot of time just by myself in the quiet. And I came to kind of the realization that my identity isn't being in a fighter. That's something that I really love to do, but I had to separate those things. And when I made the conscious choice of fighting is what I love, so this is what I'm going to do. And if if I have to live in a box and not be able to afford to go out with my friends and go on trips with my buddies, which was the case then, I wasn't living in a box, but I had to consciously make that choice of like, this could be the circumstance of that, but I'm still going to do it because I love it that much.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then how long to the next victory?
He hasn't fought again. He hasn't fought again since.
Actually, that's really funny. So after that, it was about 6 months. I think I fought in February, and then I had another fight in October. But when they asked me to fight, this Brazilian guy who was a very, very good Brazilian fighter. And Brazilian
What's his name, Cory?
Tehino. Man, I'm actually really surprised that I forget his name. Tehino something.
Okay.
So I remember I was looking in the mirror as I was folding clothes, because I still hadn't made the decision of whether or not I really wanted to fight or not. And I was kind of like saying a little prayer. I was like, man, just tell me what to do. Like, I don't know if this is the right route for me. Like, just tell me what to do. And I remember I was folding clothes, and I have a mirror above where I was folding my clothes, and I looked into the mirror, and it was almost like I either said it to myself or something was communicated to me, where it was like, man, like, this is your life. You get to choose what you want to do with it. And in that moment, that's when I decided that I was going to fight that guy, because I was really reluctant, because every video that we found on that guy was him just like knocking people out cold. And I was like, I don't know if this is a smart decision right after losing my first fight. Like, this is a very scary fight.
That's pressure you can't even imagine.
Yeah. And I was like, and I remember sitting down with my coach, and we watched tape, which I shouldn't have done with my coach. I'm not supposed to be the one making the decision of whether or not we take a fight, but we sat down and we're watching videos, and it's just boom, like him just knocking people out. And like, he goes, I think it's a good fight. And I was like, in what minute of those videos did you see that this might be a good fight? And he was like, you move your feet way too good. Like, you'll smoke this guy. And I was like, I don't think so, but you're the coach, so I guess.
Wow.
And then
you had that much trust in him that you thought, yeah.
Because I doubt myself a lot, and I think that it's almost better that way, because that keeps you in the gym. It reminds you that like
humble.
There's always going to be someone better than you, and that you need to approach it like this guy could very well beat you if you're not going to try to be your best.
Did you knock him out?
I did actually in the first round.
First round.
First round. It was probably my best fight I've ever had.
No
Wow.
way.
Yeah, felt comfortable, wasn't nervous.
I believe that's because there was a freedom that you had after that loss.
Yeah.
I found peace, man. I found peace. I found out that like fighting is something that I really love, and winning and losing isn't a big deal to me. It's more about like me just being able to do what I love.
So cool.
And what did that? What if you can describe a little for us? What did that joy feel like? Was it a feeling of just peace, or was it a feeling of okay, I'm back? Was it a feeling of?
No, it wasn't a feeling of I'm back. It was a feeling of like I conquered the demon that was telling me that I maybe wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And that's what it felt like, and had I won or lost that fight, I was so comfortable and I was so confident in like what I was doing that, even if I got finished and I had got knocked out that fight, it still would have been a win to me because I still conquered the demon of making the choice for myself of what I wanted my life to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And we have to then go back then to a great story of yours, which I later learned. And me and you came. It's so awesome that we had a friendship because we came from such opposite sides of the streets.
Right.
And the other side was you had a successful job as in advertising. I remember we talked about that, right? You were successful at that.
Not really. It was.
You could have stuck and made a good living your whole life.
Yeah, I could have made a good living, but I wouldn't call it a success story. I always knew I was going to comedy, and I was getting paid. I was taking care of stuff, but So I knew I could. I was very unhappy though.
Wait, and your unhappiness takes the form of what? Depression, or because my unhappiness takes the form of a lot of anxiety and a lot of trying to keep demons of what I really feel about myself from coming up.
Yeah.
Meaning that if I had had that show that you had and it was panned on the first day,
Right.
I would have said this is the proof that I always needed, that my mom was right, that I'm really not meant for this business.
Right.
That my dad told me, you got to go to school and learn how to work behind the cameras because that's where the jobs are. You're not gonna you're not good enough to be like those. That's the thing about my parents. The people in show business is my level on. Yeah, the people in show business were other.
Right.
They were special people.
Right.
They were a different world.
Yeah.
The odd thing is that when I started to get some sort of success and I'd see people get nervous talking to me, which happened at a certain period in my life, and I'm sure it's happened to you, and I'm sure it's happened to you, Cory, you almost realize the silliness of it. That you're like, I'm the guy that was waiting on you in Denny's.
Yeah.
I'm not, and you start realizing what a scam it is. My parents never realized fame was a scam.
Right.
So that would have, and I think I sabotaged a lot of my career in the early. I was offered lots of TV shows, and I would read for them, and I would be horrible.
Right.
And I would feel like I was letting everybody down because Carrie Hoffman, my manager at the time, and everybody said, "Well, you're the next big thing.
Right.
You're going to have the next big TV show." And the thing I heard my entire career was you're gonna hit big. You're gonna hit big. And then I would watch every new thing that was offered to me fall away because it's not what I was good at or wanted. I wanted to be a stand-up comic.
Right.
So you dealt with it in a different way than I would have. I would have been like, so I didn't even want to get to the point where I got offered a TV show because I wouldn't have wanted to deal with that because that would have reiterated to me that I was a failure.
Interesting. You think so? That's true?
I know. That's why I did one TV show. I mean, do you remember, Tom, how much heat was on me when we were young?
Yeah.
And everybody always said like, well, you didn't really go anywhere. But you made a living in stand-up comedy, and that's all I ever really wanted.
I remember you had a very distinct passion for stand-up, though.
Right.
And you weren't going to be distracted, and you thought like auditioning for stuff wasn't really what you are. You just were really, and I remember you being so focused. I remember you were reading a lot of Ayn Rand at the time.
Yes, I was.
And you were really sticking by your guns, and it was very admirable. You were very dialed in and focused, where a lot of us were like, I'll host this, or I'll be on that, or maybe I can try an audition for that. And you were like, no, I'm going to be great at this thing. And I remember being really admiring you for that.
Wow, that's interesting. You admired me because because I was a wreck.
Yeah.
I was a wreck, and I still am to a certain point. And it's funny you say you assumed there'd be more shows coming. What I always assumed was, I always knew I was able to be funny, and I always knew I was able to write a joke, and I always thought I would get specials constantly.
Right.
I never understood how rare it was to get a special. I never understood that there's a million comics trying to get a special and 30 are picked out or whatever it is, because I was just given specials. I started to take that for granted.
Right.
And then I started to go like, well, I'll just do another special when I'm ready. I took 10 years off, and now I have another special ready to sell, and nobody knows who I am. And my manager's having a very hard time selling it. And I'm like, wow, I never even appreciated those moments. But oddly enough, I'm happier than I've ever been now.
That's the thing. I know. It's a strange thing.
And I'm a better comic, and I can't get a special.
Yeah, but you will. But you will.
Well, that's why you're here. I know that you know Seinfeld, and maybe you could give my tip.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. What is your thoughts, both of you? I'd love to know what you think. Like, we've all had success at, at different times and at different levels and stuff like that. And then, they always talk, especially when you listen to athletes and people in that world, of like how important it is to really, that you control what's going to happen to you, right? That you really have to visualize it and make it happen if you want to be. And I always feel like I'm pretty positive, and I'm, like those things, like I will get another one. And I do have like that level of stuff, but then there's also, but I'm also not, selling out a 2,000 seat theater everywhere I go. Like I haven't broken through to the point, to that next level.
Right, and there's always that next level, right?
There's always that next level.
Yeah.
And do you think some of it is just fate, or do you think that maybe I haven't clicked in enough to really truly believe that that's going to be a thing? You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I almost feel like there's two schools of thoughts in like positive thinking, where there's this positive thinking of like, I can visualize something and then create whatever I see. Like you hear that all the time in sport, where it's like, oh, I saw this happening 5 years ago, and I would visualize it or whatever.
Right.
And then there's the school of thought where like you'll take things as they come, and that's like another form of positive thinking, I would say.
Right.
But what was your question again? What was the end of the question?
Like, do we have that ability and I'm not using it? Like Jim Carrey wrote, you're going to make $20 million on your film as a teenager and put it in his pocket.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. I think that we have a bit of control to create things. I almost look at it as like magic a little bit, though, where it's like, okay, because I've been in the back and I've had like very negative thoughts where I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm going to get knocked out, And then I almost use it a little bit like, all right, sparingly, where I'm like, no, like I'm going to create this win for myself. But I don't know. I kind of see it a little bit like
I feel like that puts so much pressure on you. I hate that feeling, and it was taught to me for a while. I had a guy, Brian McFadden, who was a comedian, who just did that. You got to visualize. You got to visualize. You got to visualize. And a Letterman audition happened, and I was in the back going, I'm going to go on, and the audience is going to do this. And I drove myself freaking crazy to the point that I was nervous as shit and died.
Yeah.
And then the next audition I had, I just was like, and this is what I start to always say to myself now, and I believe for me, and maybe we all have different things, my thing is, if I'm talented and I'm meant to be somewhere, if I let that happen, I'll get where I'm supposed to be. So does that make sense? That I used to, it's funny, my wife and I saw you here 2 years ago, and I was just so proud of you, because we had started out together, and this is a big room, and it had sold out. I can't sell out this room. You had done so well for yourself, and I just saw the audience having a great time, and I saw a good person up on stage making a living at what they love doing, and I was thinking to myself, for the first time, I understand that like nobody's gotten something because they're better or worse. You just get what you're. If you just do your work, you'll get where you're supposed to go, and the happiness will come to you.
Right.
So does that make sense? It's like, do you think you'd be happier playing a 2,000 seat? Because I know that like I've now gone to a different direction. I was selling out huge clubs.
Yeah.
Now I'm selling 20 tickets, and I'm enjoying it more than ever. And the people are still laughing, and I love writing the jokes. I'm like, and I said to my wife, if it ignites again, it ignites again. If the podcast is huge, the podcast is huge. I just want to keep going forward and living my life, because I realize now that stuff never made me happy.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, would I? Yeah, I think I would. I think to roll into town and do one show and make 5 times the money and then move on to the next place rather than 3 nights and 5 shows and a quarter of the money. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Yeah, I think I would love for more people to be showing up and to, but I really was the other way up until this point. I was a little bit more of like, I'm just having fun and people are showing up and we'll just keep going and it just kind of happens naturally. And now I'm like kind of clicking in with, all right, if I want to pop through to that next thing,
I would never have thought that about you because you just look so happy and you're doing so good.
I am. I'm happy, but I'm also hungry.
Yeah,
that's a great thing.
So are you? So what do you think? Do you think that you have some control over that, or do you think it's just a fate?
I think I do.
Yeah, I think so too.
I've seen your writing. I don't think so.
A little bit of creating power inside of us.
Yeah, and I think that because I don't think that I really was that hungry for that. You know, when you start out, you're just happy to be doing it.
You're just happy to get an open mic night.
You're happy just to be able to have comedians for friends.
Right.
You're happy that a comedian you like thinks you're good, and that's like enough. And you see other people like who, you know, I host this show on Sirius, and I talk to a lot of comedians, and there are some people who maybe weren't great comedians, but they knew that they wanted to be famous more than anything.
Yeah.
They just marketed the hell out of it and whatever and you wouldn't really respect them that much as comics, not really your cup of tea, but man, they're making it happen.
And they figured it out.
That thing.
Yeah. And they figured it out. That's what I always say.
Yeah.
That's a talent too, is figuring it out.
For sure. And I never really, I think up until this point, I've always been like, okay, this is cool and this is great. And we've gotten a good amount of whatever. But all of a sudden, I'm just like, you know what? I'm right here. I'm like right at this edge. And it's like, I'm going to take the attitude of maybe I can do this or I can't. Maybe saying maybe is a problem. You know, like I can do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to punch through and I will do that. Might as well try it.
Yeah.
And see if I can really make myself believe it.
And you're running into the question for a reason, likely.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I don't think it's happiness. Like I said, I've been kind of the same happy since second grade. You know, I mean, there's been very confusing things. And I'm not saying that, you know, there's been a lot of loss and all that kind of stuff, but you know, it's not going to wreck me if I keep doing this. You know what I mean?
It's funny you say doing this because now that I've gone back to playing B rooms, this is heaven to me again.
Right.
And I was doing this regularly. I'd sell out 500 seat places.
Yeah.
And I was miserable. And now I'm like, I just want to make I went from making upwards of $300,000 a year as a comedian to all of a sudden going back down to nothing almost and going like, oh, that's weird. I haven't had a special out in so long. I'm not getting booked.
Yeah.
My agent's going like, yeah, people are saying you're not selling tickets. And I start going like, I just want to sell out again. Like, so no matter what level you're at, the next level is always going to seem like the level that you're going to want to get back to.
Yeah. Which I think is good. I think you got to stay hungry, right?
And
I'm glad you're happy though.
I'm happy because I have a family. That's what I never knew. I'm happy because I have a family. I'm scared, though, now because it's not just about me.
Right.
You know, I'm scared because I now have to... My son just knows that there's eggs on his plate every morning. Yeah. and I used to say this regularly. And you know, I had sexual deviance in that I did a lot of this to get laid. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking very distinctly, looking at guys like you, who you guys don't have that need to get your number up of how many girls you've slept with. I know you don't, Tom. I know Cory doesn't. But my thing was my number. I got my number up, you know, and it was really just about sleeping. And no matter how many diseases I would get or how many hearts I would break, it was this need because of my mom to get this. I remember thinking, how could I get married? Because what would be the motivation to go on stage and become famous and make money if I'm not getting laid? Why would I do it? I remember looking at guys like you and going like, why would you do that? Like it's like Cory's got a girlfriend for a year. There are other fighters that have, you know as well as I know, Cory, there's fighter groupies that are just way hotter than comedy groupies that will just sleep with guys immediately because you're a fighter. Yeah. that doesn't motivate you. To me, that would have been, you got to become a fighter. You're going to get all the girls and stuff. You know, I've seen a lot of these fighters walk out with these hot girlfriends and stuff. Now that I have a son and I'm like, oh, now I get it.
Right.
Like, I got to put food on the table. There's your motivation. My kid will starve to death if I don't. And it's a bigger motivator. And also now I do it more for the love of it than to get laid, which never, ever satisfied me.
Well, I have to say, just as your friend, I'm very proud of you. And I said this last time when we met 2 years ago, which was the first time in a long time when we had lunch. And because you were always kind of struggling and figuring out, you had a lot of baggage. You had a lot of personal baggage. And where I always admired your work ethic and your just being hilarious.
Thank you.
It was always so great. But you were always trying to, like,
I was nuts.
You had to deal with a lot of stuff. You had the whole sex angle stuff. You had the stuff to, defy your parents and become successful. Like, there was a lot of other stuff. And it's really pretty amazing where you are now. Like that part of your life is like, you did it. You wrestled it to the ground.
And in final saying, what I want to say is what you've proven to me is the narrative of you have to be the tortured artist to be successful is bullshit, because I always thought to myself, my son's going to have the life I want to have. And I kept saying to my wife, if we're doing our job right, he won't go into show business.
Right.
But of course you can go into show business for the love of it. And that's what you did. And I think that's what was always very interesting. And that's where you really messed up everyone's narrative, because you came in and you were just the person that was just happy to be a part of everything and happy to live your life. And it didn't define you. And you got married and you had 2 kids when I was going like, why would you do that? And now I get it,
We all have pain. The idea that somebody, just because they're walking around and have nice parents and have a smile on their face, that guy isn't suffering is such a fallacy.
Yeah.
We all have it. We all do.
Yeah.
So, you don't have to be down into the gutter and be stomped and quit before you have something to say.
Unfortunately, the narrative I bought for a long time. So
it seems cool. Smoking cigarettes and whiskey and my life was so
I couldn't drink anything but banana daiquiris, so that didn't work for me. I was always a pussy. All right, well, Tom Papa is an
Great
amazing.
To see you. Nice to meet you.
Amazing.
Nice to meet you. When's your next fight?
I'm not sure yet. Maybe February or March.
February or March.
Yeah.
So do you train the whole way up until that point, or you just kind of?
Yeah, I'll still train and work on some things so that they're fine tuned when I go into the fight.
Right.
But, yeah.
Very cool.
Never asks me advice about fighting.
So weird.
He has this knowledge. I have this knowledge I'm trying to give him, but he's where I was 20 years ago, and he just has to learn that I know.
Trying to get my number up.
I'm telling him you just gotta hit hard.
Once you get herpes, you'll be on your way.
Perfect way to end. Tom, tompapa.com. What are all the plug stuff that we give for you?
Yeah, just go to tompapa.com. That tells the whole story.
Yeah.
Instagram, all that stuff.
All that good stuff. Love you, man.
You too.
Love you.
Cory, he's mine, not yours.
Podcast.